Hi everyone, I'm Angela Daddabbo, the Artistic Director here at Auburn Public Theater, and I'm sitting with my dear friend Jim Ellis.
Well, I brought some poems today that mean something to me right at this time. It's an anxious time, and I'm going to honor some things that I think it's good for us to remember right now. Coming downtown to APT and seeing downtown is, empty, and seeing beautiful APT empty of people, it's kind of heartbreaking. So these poems, I hope they mean something to me at this time. And the first one is, I'm going to dedicate this poem to the healthcare workers, hospital workers who are right now, obviously on the front lines and are just brave and probably, we know what's coming for them to deal with. So it's a poem about, more generally about working hard for something that's important. And it's called To Be of Use by Marge Piercy. It's one of my favorite poems. The people I love the best jump into work head first without dallying in the shallows, and swim off with sure strokes almost out of sight. They seem to become natives of that element, the black, sleek heads of seals bouncing like half-submerged balls. I love people who harness themselves, an ox to a heavy cart, who pull like water buffalo with massive patience, who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who stand in line and haul in their places, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hand, crumbles to dust. But the thing worth doing, well done, has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amphoras for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums, but they were made to be used. The pitcher cries out for water to carry and a person for work that is real.
That's marvelous. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
I love with great poetry how no matter when it was written, you read it and it seems as though she's written it for today.
That's the criterion of great poetry.
That's
that
right.
It lasts,
That's right.
and
Constantly relevant.
she wrote that 50 years ago.
That's right.
She's 84 years old now, and she wrote it during another turbulent time,
Right.
right? Vietnam War, civil rights, environment, women's movement, all that. And but unfortunately, in some ways, it's very relevant right now.
That's right.
So, well, the next poem I'm going to read, Angela, is a poem that honors artists, and I'm going to dedicate this to our camera person, Mr. Kerry Idell, who my understanding is has handled the open mic here for 14 years.
That's right.
My son, our son, Gavin, came to it for several years, and it meant so much to him.
Great.
So I believe that art right now is going to be essential to what happens.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So this is called In Praise, and it's by a poet new to be Michael Kiso Moore. I was turned on to him by our friend Howard Nelson. In Praise. And I am going to get through this without choking up.
Okay.
I praise the voters who believe in the mechanics of working governance. I praise the peacemakers who never give up on the bold idea that we have better natures. I praise all who see a human being first and not a label, and those too who, seeing a label first, then correct themselves. I praise the gentle souls whose words often get left unsaid because others jump in. I praise lovers of poetry who read from dog-eared books falling apart from so much reading. I praise gardeners who believe flowers and all beauty must be nourished. I praise the musicians who discover the true path to the soul. I praise the silent ones who go their way unruffled. I praise the wise ones who went before, their lanterns still guiding. I praise the animal companions who so easily practice unconditional love, right? I praise my family. I praise my friends, and they know why. I praise the strangers who show unexpected kindness. I praise teachers who somehow find their inner patience most of the time. I praise scholars who dive into history's deep end and sometimes come up for air. I praise the animals seen and unseen who have their own desires. I praise the books who held my hand in friendship when no one else would. I praise the poets whose lives lovingly trace the path of the word. I praise the bookmakers and the booksellers who feed our souls. And I praise each and every one of you in whatever small way you choose life and live against the grain. I praise the artists. Oh, how I praise the artists. I will always praise the artists.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Jim.
In praise by Michael Kiso Moore.
What stirs you about that poem?
Well, you know, just the individual lines, the people who's somebody else always starts talking over them.
I love that
They
line.
stick with it.
I love that
They
line.
stick with it. You know, the musicians who show us the way to the soul.
Love that
My
line, too.
beautiful musician friends. So, yeah, beautiful poem.
That's a
So,
good one. Thank you.
it's also St. Patrick's Day.
Yes, it is. Happy St. Patrick's
That's
Day.
exactly right, and we're
Yeah.
gonna celebrate it, we're gonna celebrate it nonetheless,
Now,
and
we're not wearing green
that's true.
because we're not Irish.
That's true too.
Right.
Thank
so-
you.
But we're still celebrating.
We're celebrating it, yep.
I'm wearing green,
Carrie's wearing
Okay,
green.
good.
but I don't know if you know this, Jim, but, I'm Jewish, but I'm Irish Jewish, and my grandparents came over
Okay.
from Ireland in the Great Potato Knish famine of the late 1800s. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good night.
Enjoy the meal.
Okay.
Well, this is an Irish poem, and it's from Anthony Rafferty, who I believe, and our friend Dan Cleveland would correct me on this. He didn't write it down; it was oral back around 1790 when he was writing. But it was written down, I believe, after he died, and he has many beautiful poems. But this is a poem celebrating the spirit of Irish poetry and music, dogged, nitty-gritty poetry.
Of which gratefully there is.
Still there.
That's right.
Still there.
That's right.
I am Raftery the poet, full of hope and love, with eyes without light. He was blind. Calm without anguish. Going back in my travels with the light of my heart, weary and tired to the end of my journey. Look at me now, and my back to the wall, playing music to empty pockets. Playing music to empty pockets. So that's for musicians
That's lovely.
and APT.
That's lovely. Thank you. Have you been to Ireland?
I have not.
I have
Yeah.
not either. Do you have an interest in visiting?
Well, I have an interest in the Irish poets. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, okay. So I had the opportunity to meet Jeanette Walls once,
Mhm.
the author of Glass
No,
Castle.
I've read that book. That's a
You
beautiful book.
remember that? And I
Mhm.
had the
Wonderful, wonderful privilege of driving her back to the airport the next morning after she'd come to Auburn
Wow.
to
Mm.
read from her book, which was
Yeah.
really great. And just before she got out of the car, she asked me if I had ever been to Ireland. She'd just come back from a trip to Ireland. And she sort of took me by my lapels and she said, Angela, even the cab drivers recite poetry
Absolutely.
while they're driving you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
She said, do not collect $200, do not pass go, do not whatever, get to Ireland.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
ever since she said that, I have this fire in my belly to
Yeah.
get there.
Well, a culture like Ireland, a culture
That's
like
right.
Chile, and
That's
there's
right.
cultures even in America,
That's right.
where poetry is used by regular folks.
That's right.
It's not something that's only
right.
on campus, it's not something
That's
that's
right.
only
That's
in
right.
books, it's used
That's right,
to bring people together.
that's
you
right.
know, So,
And when I hear Ireland now, I just think of cab drivers going around,
it's beautiful, yeah,
you know, reciting James Joyce.
yeah.
I hope that I find that when I get there.
And you're putting that in your poem, correct?
Okay.
So, it's also spring, in
Yes,
spite
it
of
is.
the
Thank you.
concern, it's
Thank you,
spring, and
God.
it's a, you know, if we gotta go through this isolation, it's good to be able to go outside and enjoy it, we
Absolutely.
all feel that. and
Absolutely.
We have snowdrops up in our yard and daffodils up, so.
Oh, that's so great.
And the best poem about spring ever written
Is?
is by Isa,
Okay.
Kobayashi Isa,
Yes,
who died the same year as Anthony Raftery, 1827.
interesting.
Yeah,
Okay,
and it's a haiku, and it's applicable to our loneliness right now, I think.
got it.
Under cherry trees, there are no strangers. Under
That's
cherry
lovely.
trees, there are no strangers.
That's lovely.
We are all, you know, we're all part of the same
Web.
web.
We truly are.
So this next poem is also about Ireland, and this poem is still hot because it was sent to me about an hour ago by a member of our Auburn Auburn Public Theater Poetry Circle, Jim Brady.
Perfect.
And he's an excellent haiku, or sinru, it's called, when it's a haiku-ish, but it's more about our relationships. He's an excellent poet. One of many excellent poets we have in our
Yeah,
circle.
so many
And thank
great.
you,
Well, thank
Auburn
you.
Public Theater,
Yeah.
for letting us do that
Thank
for
you all
several
for
years.
coming. Yeah.
And we're gonna keep it going
Yes, we are.
through this, we are. So,
Absolutely.
Jim Brady's poem. And I didn't ask Jim Brady if I could read it, but I'm asking right now. So, carefully is the name of the poem. Carefully hiding away. Equinox looming. Time to air it all out. So,
That's lovely.
this is a time not just to
That's lovely.
grieve and be depressed like
That's right.
most of us are.
Could you read that again?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And so what we're doing right now,
Yeah,
we're hiding.
Yeah.
Carefully hiding out.
right.
Wearing our gloves. Keeping away from people, hard to do. Carefully hiding out. Equinox looming. Time to air it all out. Whether that's laundry, socks, blankets, or maybe our political system. It's time to air some things out. So Jim, congratulations.
Thank you,
sir.
Jim.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a keeper.
Thank you, Jim Brady.
That's a winner. That's a keeper. Thank you.
Which leads us to the issue of anger, and I wanted to be positive, you know, in reading this and reaching out to your Auburn Public Theater friends and our Poetry Circle friends, but I'm angry. I'm sure you're angry.
That's right.
I'm sure you're angry. I'm sure most people are angry. I'm angry at the way this has been handled, not handled. So I'm gonna reach back to a hero of mine, Bertolt Brecht. And, you know, Bertolt Brecht lived through the rise of the Nazis in Germany, fled to the good old US, where we gave him sanction and then put him before the House Un-American Activities Committee, and he was forced finally to go back to Germany after World War II, wound up in East Germany, where he was, you know, admired for a while until he started criticizing that government. So he was a activist and a brave man and a great poet.
Great poet.
So this poem is kind of my translation of it, so it's a little bit updated,
Great.
and I think Bertolt would be okay. That's
Okay,
my
good. I
opinion.
think so too.
Yeah. It's called Those Who Eat Their Fill. Those who eat their fill speak to the hungry of incredible times ahead. Those who grow richer every year demand greater sacrifice from the poor. Those who make the elderly choose between food and medicine brag of their faith in God. Those who are leading our planet into the abyss say they know what's best for the future. Bertolt Brecht.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Marvelous.
yeah. And then, you know, one thing I feel is depression, as we said, coming down here, talking with folks that are around downtown, people are depressed. So, in honor of that, I guess, or recognition of that, this is a poem by Langston Hughes. I think it's my friend Denise Bulger's favorite poem, she's told me, and it's a beautiful poem. It's hard to read, short. Island by Langston Hughes. Wave of sorrow, do not drown me now. I see the island still ahead somehow. I see the island, and its sands are fair. Wave of sorrow, take us there.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
Well,
that's,
we got to reach back to our poetry ancestors right
Yes,
now.
we do.
We do.
We
You know,
do.
for strength. People have been through.
Yep.
You know, they've been through savage things, as we know.
I mean, nothing like this, but things very similar.
Things very
That's
similar,
right.
that
That's right.
onerous, that frightening,
That's
that
right.
lethal.
That's right.
So we look back and realize we're going to get through this together.
Yes, we are.
The last poem I'm going to read, I think, is a poem of hope. It's about, you know, you'll recognize it's a vignette of something that happened on a subway, daily life, but there is an undercurrent to it that's American undercurrent right now. But to me, it's about hope, because hope means that there's more of us than just yourself or 2 or 3 people. We got some things in common that we know need to change. And this is by the great poet Claudia Rankine.
Yes.
And she's born in Jamaica, lives in the U.S. Her book, Citizen, is just a must-read for. It's mainly about racial hypocrisy, but it's about our country right now, and it's a gorgeous book. And this is a section from it, and it's called "A Man Knocked Over Her Son." A man knocked over her son in the subway. You feel your own body wince. He's okay, but the son of a bitch kept walking. She says she grabbed a stranger's arm and told him to apologize. I told him to look at the boy and apologize. Yes, and you want it to stop. You want the child pushed to the ground to be seen, to be helped to his feet, to be brushed off by the person that did not see him, has never seen him, has perhaps never seen anyone who is not a reflection of himself.
That's right.
The beautiful thing is that a group of men began to stand behind me like a fleet of bodyguards, she says, like newly found uncles and brothers. So thank you.
That's lovely. That's a great poem, I think, a great poem to end on, because it's so evocative of, again, these times, you know, something is lost, and then in the wake of loss is what comes next, rebirth or new connections. I know we were saying before we started today that, you know, we both reached out to friends of ours who are older. One of my girlfriends in Syracuse said that she's making sure everybody in her apartment building who's elderly has what they need from the grocery store. And, you know, the world's full of these stories right now, and I'm really thinking to myself, what took me so long? Why have I been waiting to check in with these people? And I know our lives are busy and things are chaotic, and so we don't find the time or make the time, but I've had some lovely moments of connection with people with whom I'm not normally in regular contact. And I hope that will be one of the lovely silver linings.
Well, I will
this
say,
particular epidemic.
APT, I predict, and I know this is going to be a huge burden on you guys, it's like it is on businesses. I believe you were the first Auburn business to you know, close your doors out of safety. Good on you, but it's hard for, you know, your employees. I know it is, but it's hard for the community. You guys have been so central to this. I look at the wall over there of the things, you know, of all the posters of the performances, of which Annie and I have seen maybe, you know, 5% over the years, and they're just, it's incredible what you've done, and I think and I hope that it can, you know, continue, even if it's in a digital format right now. I don't know,
That's right. Well,
but you've brought a lot of people together.
Thank you.
You know,
Thank you. Well, one of my high school teachers, Jerry Martin, told me when I was in the 11th grade that if I found a job I loved, I would never have to work a day in my life.
yeah, right.
Now, it took me until my middle 30s to get
Sure,
here,
yeah,
but gratefully I've been able to do it now. I, as one of many people, have been able to do it for the last 14 years. So, in wrapping up, I just want to share with you a quick story of how I was introduced to poetry, and then
Okay.
maybe you'll want to comment on that
Mhm.
for our viewers who
Mhm.
are maybe thinking about incorporating poetry in their day-to-day lives. You know, to read poetry quietly to oneself on the page, I think is very similar to studying the architectural
Yeah.
plans of the Sistine Chapel. You know, I mean, I think you can get
Okay.
something.
What are you looking at?
Right,
really?
from
Yeah,
the architectural plans. I think it's probably better to be in the building
Yeah.
and to look up and to
Right.
have the experience.
A
of the
little
Sistine
better,
Chapel.
yeah.
A little bit better than looking at the plans.
Yeah.
And so when I was a young kid, elementary school, my mother used to serve these fabulous meals to my three brothers, my dad, and myself. And then they'd eat pretty quickly and they'd scatter. And then my mom would say, "Go get my poetry books,"
Oh,
that were
man.
kept in the
Yeah.
shelf in the central hallway. And
Yeah.
I'd grab these, you know, Shelley and Blake and Edgar Allan Poe and
Yeah,
E.
yeah,
Cummings. There was
yeah.
E. Cummings. And she would not just read them, she would perform
Yeah,
them.
boy. Yeah. Mhm.
And one of the very first poems she performed for me in this way that I have a memory of was "May I Feel," said he. I mean, I didn't even know what sex was, but she was so animated in the way she performed it. And it was, you know, these were my early experiences of poetry. They were on your feet,
Yeah.
moving, you know, speaking out loud.
Yeah.
And so when I got into classes where we were just sort of assigned to go home and read a poem, I would read it out loud to my mom because I had this first experience, this kind of learned experience to do it in that way. So do you have any comment about what people can do with poetry while they're sheltering in place?
You know, I'm a believer that poetry is mistaught innocently, not out of
Of course.
malice, but it's just, and part of it is the lack of, you know, just kind of physical energy that goes into it. Another thing is that I think poetry sometimes is treated as sort of like a weird sacred object that you can't even ask a question about. You know, you hear somebody read it and really you got like zero,
Right.
and you sit there like, okay, because you're embarrassed to ask. And I don't think poetry, you know, needs that kind of
Right.
coddling, and we ought to be talking about it, using it in our daily lives as much. And so you were lucky to have
Well, I
a
was
mom
very
like
lucky,
that.
and
So,
I'm sure
yeah.
you've heard people say, you know, with, you know, to a non-poetry loving, you know, as poetry lovers, you and I as poetry, we'll hear people who don't necessarily have access or, you know, make access to poetry, and they'll say, "I don't understand it."
Sure.
And when they say that, what I hear them saying is, "I don't understand color," and I think, which one?
Yeah.
And what do
yeah.
you mean?
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
think it's about being exposed. So any poets you want to name really quickly as places for people to go?
Well, okay, so the best poet
Yeah.
of the 20th century,
Yeah.
Thomas Tranströmer,
Okay,
he won the Nobel
Thomas
Prize in
Tranströmer.
2012.
okay.
I mean, there's an explosion of
Yeah.
poetry right
Yeah,
now. I
yeah,
don't like
yeah,
to use
yeah.
that
No,
verb,
no,
but
it's great. It's
I mean,
great.
and it's international,
Yep,
and in the United States, I mean, to say it's diverse that's not the word. I mean, it's
Right.
just there is just great poetry coming out of every different kind of community now
Right,
around the
right,
world.
Right,
I mean, I'm not talking about, you know, that it started this week. Well, this is over the last generation,
right.
but it's extraordinary, and it's just
Any other
so.
names? Any other names?
Any other names? Let's think here. Well, Wisława Szymborska was a Polish poet who
Okay.
won the Nobel Prize, I think 2009, I believe.
Okay,
And she writes a lot about history,
okay,
and she was a Polish woman that was in the Polish underground and survived that. You know,
Okay.
Europeans didn't have a real happy 20th century, right?
okay.
And her honesty about the dark side of human nature and the courage of people that, you know, the Polish women poets, it's just a thing. They're of the 20th century are such a testimony. Right now, Native people in our country, I mean, there's just an amazing, well, our current poet laureate, Joy Harjo, you know, I mean, it's just wonderful that we have other voices, and it reading international poetry across our, you know, not just our cohort, is just so helpful to get a sense of
That's
what
right.
other people are experiencing,
That's
you know, I mean, how life is different,
That's
and
right.
how life is the same. It's just there's no better way.
No, there's.
Poetry is obviously the primo art. We
It's
all
the
know
primo
that.
art.
I'm saying that to my
We're
musician
prejudiced.
friends.
We're
yeah.
prejudiced, but it's
Yeah.
the primo art. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank
being
APT
here
for what you
today.
guys do. Thank you guys.
This is our
Yeah.
last live event for the
Okay.
foreseeable future, and we're so grateful to be here with poet Jim
Absolutely.
Ellis. And perhaps in a couple months, we'll see a book of poetry by
Yeah.
Mr. Jim Ellis. And we'll have you back to read that
Well,
book of poems.
there's a
here
lot
at
of
the
awesome
theater.
poets right
Yeah,
here,
here at the
right
theater,
here
here
in
at the
Auburn.
theater.
So a lot of awesome poets.
Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Have a great night. Stay safe, stay healthy, and work hard to keep your heart open. Thanks.